Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome back to another episode of the Mysticism Decoded Podcast. I am your host, Aleph. In this episode, we are going to continue with the Gateway Process, audiobook and analysis. We are up to section 22, Special Status, Out-of-Body Experience. I hope you had a chance to catch the last pod, which was titled Dimensions in Between. And I made a correlation to this section with the book Alice in Wonderland. So what a lot of people may not realize is that the author of Alice in Wonderland, number one, he was a mathematician, but number two, he was very well educated in all things esoteric. We're talking about the author Lewis Carroll. So all of these events and stories that occur in the book, and you might be more familiar with the movie from Disney, Alice in Wonderland from the 40s, they actually all have an esoteric meaning behind them that have to do with a lot of what this document talks about, being the dimensions that exist in between the time-space reality where we live and the absolute, which is energy and infinity, which is God, which we've talked about on this pod. And also sort of what you are meant to do in this life, or what you are meant to understand in this life. And the blog post that I used to compare it to from one Dr. Ian, I think he did a great job in breaking all of that down. So I narrated his article and gave examples and analysis to connect it back to the gateway process. So if you missed that, I think it would be worth it for you to go back and watch it. That would be pod 9, just to do a quick catch up to where we're starting today, which again, special status, out-of-body experience. So let's get to it. Although human consciousness can, with enough practice, move beyond the dimension of time-space and interface with other energy systems in other dimensions, the entire process is appreciably enhanced if that consciousness can be detached in large measure from the physical body before such interface is attempted. So what this is saying is you can go into these other dimensions, accelerate your vibrations fast enough to do so, which again is to exceed Planck's distance of 10 to the negative 33 centimeters. But you could do it either in body, or you can do it from an out-of-body state, starting in an out-of-body state. And whenever you do it from an out-of-body state, it is a greater force. It is a greater power. So this is what he's about to talk about. Once an individual becomes proficient in the technique of out-of-body movement and then reaches the point where he is able to break out of time-space while out of his body, he gains the advantage of clicking out part of his enhanced consciousness while starting from a base located much closer to the dimensions with which he wishes to communicate. So whenever you're doing this from an out-of-body state, essentially you're just starting closer to the finish line. In other words, since he is starting from a point much higher up, to use an analogy from the time-space context, that part of his consciousness involved in clicking out will have that much more time to interact in dimensions beyond time-space because less time is required to traverse the intervening layers. So it's sort of like a race, and just imagine you're starting closer to the finish line. It takes you less time to reach those intervening layers, those intervening dimensions, whenever you're starting from an out-of-body state versus doing this within your body. Moreover, once the individual is able to project his consciousness beyond time-space, that consciousness would logically tend to entrain its frequency output with the new energy environment to which it is exposed, therein greatly enhancing the extent to which the individual's altered consciousness may be further modified to achieve a much heightened point of focus and a much refined oscillating pattern. As a result, a self-reinforcing process should ensue, whereby the farther consciousness in the out-of-body state can be projected beyond the time-space dimension, the more its level of energy output would be enhanced, thus promoting the potential for still further travel. The tentative conclusion to be drawn is that the out-of-body state may be regarded as an extremely effective way of accelerating the process of enhancing consciousness and of interfacing with dimensions beyond time-space. If achieving and exploiting the out-of-body experience as opposed to concentrating his full efforts on expanding his consciousness exclusively from a physical base, the former would appear to promise much faster and more impressive successes than does the latter. So this paragraph, it's not too complicated. It's just saying that if you begin your ascent or your journey into the other dimensions while starting in an out-of-body state, as opposed to starting while your spirit is still in body, you get to it sooner, you have more time to frolic there, for lack of better words, and it is overall a more powerful force compared to starting while in body. So being that was pretty short, let's include the next paragraph in this pod as well, the absolute in perspective. It may be helpful at this point to pause and recap the major aspects of our intellectual journey from time-space to the realm of the absolute. We have spoken at some length concerning the incredibly complex hologram, which is created by the intersection of energy patterns generated by the totality of all dimensions of the universe, time-space included. So this is referring to the holographic matrix, the holographic consciousness that constitutes our reality. We have noted that our minds constitute energy fields which interact with various aspects of this hologram to deduce information which is ultimately processed through the left hemisphere of our brains to reduce it to a form that we employ for the process we call thinking. We have implied that this hologram is the finite embodiment in active energy form of the infinite consciousness of the absolute. So again, understand that the absolute here is referring to God, and God is energy in a state of infinity. And the universe, or Torus, is the finite embodiment, meaning God slivered off a piece of his infinite energy and slowed it down, confined it, so that it is not vibrating at the speed of infinity, in order to give it form and individuality, and as a byproduct, location. Because whenever you vibrate at the speed of infinity, you have no location. You are all places, all things at all times. So this is the differentiation between energy and infinity and finite embodiment. It is the title that we assign to that vast pool of energy in a state of perfect rest, and rest is equivalent to infinity, over which the physical universe is layered and from whence it comes. Incidentally, to describe this, Bentov uses the analogy of a very deep sea, comparing the still depths of the sea to the dimension of the absolute, while assigning the storm-tossed waves above to represent the physical universe with which we are familiar. The slightly agitated currents of the sea to be found in between the turbulent surface and the totally still depths represent energy in the process of either going into rest, approaching infinity, meaning going back to God consciousness, or coming out of rest, meaning to essentially live out their journey as finite, confined energy going around the torus. And that is what our reality is, and that is what time is. It is energy going around the torus. And let's get one more section in here, at least, maybe two. But next we have from Big Bang to Torus. Working from the widely accepted Big Bang theory, I said that word. Working from the widely accepted Big Bang theory, Bentov presents a conceptual model to depict the process of time-space evolution, the relative position of the universal hologram. That hologram is often called a torus because it is thought to have the overall shape of an immense self-contained spiral. Basing his thesis on recent studies concerning the distribution of quasars and operating on the premise that in the universe, smaller processes tend to be mirror images of larger ones. For example, the pattern of electrons around the nucleus of an atom mirrors the way planets orbit their suns and so on. Bentov postulates the following scenario. Taking his cue from the observed capability of quasars to eject enormously concentrated beams of matter from their interiors is a controlled, non-concentric version of the Big Bang. He envisages a similar process occurring in the generation of the universe. Noting that those galaxies located to the north of our own galaxy are moving away faster than those located to the south, and that those to the east and west are demonstrably more distant, Bentov regards this as substantive evidence that the jet of matter, which expanded into our universe, has turned back upon itself, eventually forming an ovoid or egg shape. He sees matter in our universe entering the ovoid pattern following ejection from a nucleus composed of extremely compressed energy through a white hole. So what this means is, how do our souls enter the universe? How does matter enter the universe? It is via what we call a white hole. And you could consider this the flip side of the coin from a black hole. Energy comes in through a white hole, it exits through a black hole. And energy constitutes everything: our bodies, the planets, your desk, and also our spirit. Because our spirit is energy. Our spirit is an electromagnetic wave, a confined, finite electromagnetic wave, as opposed to God, that is an infinite electromagnetic wave. So that is why you can also refer to God, and I do this in my book, as an infinite photon. The photon God. God is light. And if you're familiar with the New Testament and the idea and concept of Jesus, how many times throughout the New Testament do you hear Jesus as an analogy to light, literally an electromagnetic wave? Now, also in the New Testament, what a lot of people may not know is that oftentimes when the Bible is talking about Jesus, it is actually an allegory to the sun. And whenever I say son, I don't mean S-O-N, like Jesus is God's son. What I mean is S-U-N. Jesus is God's Son, S-U-N. And why is it God's Son, S-U-N? Well, to steal a line from Jordan Maxwell, it's not your son. Whose son is it? It's God's son. It's a star in space. But Jesus is an allegory for the Son in a lot of the New Testament. And the Son is also light. So just understand the connection here between God is light and an electromagnetic wave. Jesus is light and electromagnetic wave. The Son is light, produces light in an electromagnetic wave. At the end of its trip to the far end of the ovoid, he sees it departing via a black hole. In such a model, time is observed to be a measure of the change which occurs as energy evolves into new, more complex forms as it progresses along the distance from the white hole side of the nucleus around the shell of this cosmic egg until it enters the black hole. So what time is, and this helps to understand time as a physical characteristic, time is energy going around the torus and changing as it goes around. So that's what time is. Time is energy evolving as it goes around this cosmic egg ovoid shaped torus. So that's why you can understand why time is a physical component and that all time occurs simultaneously. And that the reason that we experience time linearly moment to moment here in our dimension is because of where the fourth dimension is relative to the fifth dimension. And again, this is something I write about in great detail in my book, Connect to Source, where I am making the case that the Sefer Yetzirah, the first book of Kabbalah, the book of creation, is giving us a description of the fifth dimension. And the word used for this is sipur, which in Hebrew means to inform. And we are to understand that the fifth dimension informs time, the fourth dimension. So whenever I start covering my book in the next series, after I conclude Gateway Process, I'll be getting to this in greater detail. But in the meantime, I encourage you to buy my book. You can simply read it there right away and not wait for the pod and be supporting me at the same time. In other words, as energy expelled from infinity and confined within limits by the conscious of the absolute achieves form and motion following ejection from the white hole at the top of the egg, time begins as a measure of the cadence of this evolutionary movement as reality goes around the shell of the egg on its journey to the black hole at the far end. So I hope that this helps you to understand why it is that time needs to be thought of as a physical constituent, just the way you look at your computer or anything else that's physical. Time is energy going around the torus, and so is everything else. Our reality is energy moving around the torus. Time is energy moving around the torus and evolving. I want to leave it off here for today. Don't want to overwhelm you guys. On the next pod, we're going to continue with section 25, our place in time. And we are nearly halfway through the document here. It is just continuously as dense for the most part. From here on out, we are truly in the thick of things. Some of the pages as we go along, we have just diagrams from Bentov, which again, I think are pretty good. I think he's a good artist. I like the way that he draws. And this here is a depiction of what our universe looks like in terms of the shape of the torus. It almost looks a little bit like a heart, too. I mean, this is what's described as a cosmic egg or ovoid, but it also kind of looks like a heart. And considering that the energy that is God, the infinite energy, is love, where people think of love as an emotion, but is actually a form of energy. For our torus to resemble a heart, I think that is not necessarily an accident. It's something to ponder. One of the really important sections we'll be getting into soon as well, quality of consciousness. This has to do with understanding why the body has its own consciousness separate from the spirit. And this is important in understanding why in the creation of a golem, why the golem has consciousness, being that it is a humanoid soulless automaton, yet it has the capability for interaction, following instructions, and many other things. So why is that? And we'll understand that more from the quality of consciousness paragraph. And again, the golem, what people consider a mythical folklore figure, I submit to you is 100% unequivocally real. This is one of the most important aspects of my book, writing about how and why the golem is real, the science behind how it is created, which is something that the section patterning in this document touches on as well. And it is really just completely unknown information to the mass population of this planet. 99.9% of the world does not know about this, most of which may not have even ever heard of a golem. But as we go along, I intend to show you that the golem is not a myth, it is totally real. And the Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation, in which I compare this document to in the book that I wrote, it provides instructions on how to create a golem. So rather remarkable material. So thank you all for joining me today. As always, if you liked what you heard here, just like everyone else asks, please like, comment, share, subscribe. I am a new channel here trying to get the word out, trying to spread the truth behind the nature of reality and explain to the world and bring to light what the books of mysticism are, that they are not fake news or fantasy like people like to think or dismiss, because that's how modern society categorizes and connotes the word mysticism. But these are all containing true stories, true history, technology beyond our time, including, if you want to call this esoteric technology, that as well. So until the next time, thanks for joining me today. Aleph Lev out.